James Earl Ray's life took a dark turn when he became fixated on Martin Luther King Jr., a rising figure in the American civil rights movement. King quickly rose to prominence, captivating the nation with his calls for racial equality and economic justice. His influence reached the highest levels of government, putting pressure on President Lyndon Johnson, despite their sometimes contentious relationship. But as King's influence grew, so did the dangers surrounding him. In the spring of 1968, King traveled to Memphis, Tennessee to support striking sanitation workers who were fighting for fair wages and better working conditions. James Earl Ray, a man who would forever be linked to one of the most devastating moments in American history, began his life in the shadow of the Great Depression. Born in 1928, the oldest of 9 children, Ray drifted into a life of crime. He was caught robbing a store, a pattern that would eventually culminate in a fateful act of violence. In 1959, he was imprisoned in Missouri for robbing a Kroger store. But Ray was restless. He escaped in a bakery truck in 1967, embarking on an odyssey that would take him across continents and lead him down a dark path. He drifted from St. Louis to Chicago, then to Montreal and Birmingham, Alabama, where he acquired a white Mustang and a driver's license. From there, he drove nonstop to Mexico, assuming the alias Eric Starvo Galt. He briefly tried his hand at making pornographic films in Puerto Vallarta, but with little success. Meanwhile, a darker obsession was taking hold. Ray was drawn to the segregationist views of George Wallace, and his admiration for Wallace's platform fueled a dangerous conviction that Martin Luther King Jr. had to be eliminated. Despite this growing extremism, Ray also pursued seemingly ordinary activities, taking dance lessons and attending bartending school in Los Angeles. This strange mix of the mundane and the menacing would define the next chapter of his life. In early 1968, Ray set his plan in motion. He drove from Los Angeles to Atlanta, his Mustang loaded with marijuana to fund his journey. He meticulously planned his route, carefully choosing motels and using fake names to avoid detection. Ray deliberately chose Selma, Alabama, as his first stop, knowing King was scheduled to be there. He was stalking his prey. Selma, a city steeped in civil rights history, was a symbolic target. It was here that King led the Selma March, a 54-mile nonviolent protest from Selma to Montgomery in 1965. Ray checked into the Flamingo Motel, signing in as Eric S. Galt. He was gathering intelligence, observing King's security detail and travel patterns, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. King, along with Ralph Abernathy and Andrew Young, led a march down Beale Street, the heart of Memphis. But what began as a peaceful demonstration suddenly erupted into chaos. The air filled with the shouts of angry protesters, the shattering of glass, and the sirens of police cars. Cars were overturned and set ablaze, windows shattered, and stores looted. King, a champion of peaceful protest, watched in dismay as the march spiraled out of control. He and his aides found themselves trapped in a surging mob, struggling to escape the violence that erupted around them. The Memphis police finally reached the civil rights leader and his group, pulling them from the chaos to the safety of the newly opened Hilton Hotel. J. Edgar Hoover, director of the FBI and a staunch opponent of the civil rights movement, saw the riot as confirmation of his deepest fears about King. He believed that King's activism was a threat to national security and used the riot to further his campaign to discredit him. Hoover instructed his agents to gather any evidence that could link King to the violence, hoping to paint him as a dangerous radical. This eruption of violence played directly into the hands of James Earl Ray. It fueled his belief that King was a threat who needed to be stopped. For King, the riot was a profound setback. He felt a deep sense of responsibility for the violence and was determined to redeem his vision of peaceful protest. He vowed to return to Memphis and lead a peaceful march, postponing his planned march on Washington. Ray, now calling himself Eric Galt, carefully considered his options. He knew he needed a weapon powerful enough to kill from a distance, something that would allow him to escape unseen. A high-powered rifle was the answer. Time was of the essence. King had announced his return to Memphis, and Ray was determined to be ready. He scanned the newspaper ads, his eyes settling on Era Marine Supply Company. He entered the store, the scent of gun oil and leather hanging in the air. The Remington Game Master, a powerful rifle with a telescopic sight, would become the instrument of his deadly obsession. He carefully inspected the weapon, checking the action and sighting down the barrel. After a brief hesitation, he exchanged it for the same model in a larger caliber, ensuring maximum impact. With practiced ease, he filled out the sales slip with a false name and address, paying in cash to avoid leaving a trace. Back in Atlanta, Ray anxiously followed King's activities in the pages of the Atlanta Constitution. King's frenetic pace and frequent changes in schedule made predicting his location difficult. But finally, the newspaper provided a clear opportunity. King was scheduled to appear on historic Beale Street in Memphis. On April 2nd, with his plan firmly in place, Ray loaded the Game Master rifle and a few possessions into his white Mustang and set off for Memphis. He left his portable TV in his Atlanta rooming house with a note stating he would return in a week or so to retrieve it. But Ray had no intention of ever coming back. On April 3rd, King and his entourage arrived in Memphis. Recalling the recent riot and his refuge at the white-owned Hilton, they chose the Lorraine Motel, a black-owned establishment and a favorite of black entertainers and celebrities. King had stayed there before, and the owner, who refused to charge him, gave him his usual room, number 306 on the second floor. Just one block west on South Main Street stood a dilapidated rooming house. Ray, under the alias Eric Galt, rented a small room with a window overlooking the Lorraine Motel. He paid $8.50 for the week. Ray waited patiently, watching the motel. Hours passed. Then, just after 6 p.m., he saw him. Martin Luther King Jr. stepped onto the balcony. This was his moment. Unsatisfied with the angle from his room, Ray grabbed his rifle and rushed to the communal bathroom at the end of the hall. He locked the door, the old lock clicking shut. He positioned himself in the bathtub, the cold porcelain against his skin. He took aim through the grimy window, his finger tightening on the trigger. He could see King clearly now, just 269 feet away. He squeezed the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the stillness of the evening. King slumped to the balcony floor, mortally wounded. Those nearby pointed towards the rooming house, their fingers tracing the path of the deadly bullet. Joseph Lau, a photographer for Life magazine, captured the scene in an image that would become iconic. Within seconds, Ray was racing down the stairs, his heart pounding. He wrapped the rifle in a dingy green blanket, his mind racing. He sprinted to his Mustang parked down the street, but instinct told him that a man carrying a long green package would attract attention. He tossed the bundle into the entranceway of a nearby amusement company and sped away. The shot that changed America had been fired. Within minutes, the Lorraine was swarming with police, newsmen, and King was loaded into an ambulance. Sirens wailed as police cars converged on the Lorraine Motel and the rooming house. Officers swarmed the buildings, searching for clues. At the hospital, doctors frantically fought to save King's life, but it was too late. Meanwhile, Ray slammed the Mustang into gear and roared away from the scene. The tires screeched as he turned onto South Main Street, leaving a trail of burnt rubber. He sped away, his heart pounding, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had done it. He had killed Martin Luther King. Back at the rooming house, investigators quickly determined that the fatal shot had been fired from the bathroom window. A small indentation in the window frame, likely caused by the rifle's recoil, provided a crucial clue. The entire frame was carefully removed and sent to the FBI for analysis. The initial reports were chaotic and conflicting. Witnesses described a white Mustang, but no one knew the license plate or the direction it had gone. 10 minutes later, a police lieutenant was flagged down by a young man with a CB radio. A dramatic chase was unfolding on the airwaves. A blue Pontiac, in hot pursuit of a white Mustang, speeding north towards the Naval Air Station. Police scrambled to intercept, but it was a phantom chase, a cruel diversion. Ray raced down deserted highways, the landscape blurring past. He was heading back to Atlanta to retrieve his revolver and the money he had stashed there. Minutes ticked by, each one precious. Ray knew the longer he remained free, the better his chances of escape. The hoax had given him a crucial head start. At 7:05 p.m., Martin Luther King Jr. was pronounced dead. The news reverberated around the world, plunging the nation into mourning. But the assassin was already miles away, slipping through the net. As Ray sped north, the nation was in an uproar. News of King's assassination dominated the airwaves. The FBI launched the largest manhunt in its history, with agents fanning out across the country, determined to bring the killer to justice. Ray, listening to the radio reports, felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. He had escaped the immediate dragnet, but he knew the authorities were closing in. He reached his rooming house in Atlanta and quickly gathered his belongings. His revolver, the money he had stashed away, even his laundry. Every stop, every interaction was a gamble. Ray knew that one wrong move could lead to his capture. He considered returning to Mexico, but a different plan took shape. He would escape to Rhodesia, a white minority-ruled nation defying international sanctions. Rhodesia, with its racist policies, represented a haven for Ray. He admired their stance and believed he would be welcomed as a hero.
Starting with a little off the top from the corner store.
He meticulously studied maps and travel routes, plotting his escape to this distant land. Ray, a man who despised racial equality, sought refuge in a country founded on racial segregation. He abandoned the Mustang, wiping away any fingerprints. He boarded a Greyhound bus, sinking into a seat, trying to blend in with the other passengers. He was a fugitive, alone and on the run, with the weight of his crime heavy on his shoulders. But he clung to the hope of reaching Rhodesia, a place where he believed he could find sanctuary. He moved quickly, driven by fear and a desperate hope of freedom. Atlanta, Cincinnati, Toronto, each city a stepping stone on his journey to Rhodesia.
I have to lie to go to bed and lie to wake.
Memphis was a city in mourning, the streets filled with mourners and the National Guard. Though Lorraine Motel, now a crime scene, was swarming with FBI agents, they meticulously examined the rifle, the blanket, and the bathroom window frame, searching for fingerprints and other clues. Ballistics experts analyzed the bullet, tracing it back to the Remington game master. Meanwhile, in a quiet Toronto neighborhood, Ray slipped into a nondescript rooming house run by a couple named Sispakowski. He was now Ramon George Sneed, a name he had plucked from the newspaper archives. Ray, a master of disguise and deception, methodically constructed his new identity. The abandoned Mustang in Atlanta, registered under a false name, would become a crucial link in the chain of evidence leading to Ray. But for now, it sat unnoticed, gathering dust. The riots and unrest gripping the nation complicated the investigation, stretching law enforcement resources thin. Days turned into weeks, and the trail seemed to grow cold. But the investigators were relentless, slowly piecing together the puzzle. They interviewed witnesses, followed leads, and analyzed evidence, determined to bring King's killer to justice. In Toronto, Ray went about his life as Ramon George Sneed. He was playing a high-stakes game, knowing that his freedom, and perhaps his life, depended on his ability to remain undetected. The real Ramon George Sneed, unaware that his identity had been stolen, went about his life in Ottawa, while the man who had killed Martin Luther King Jr. assumed his name. The irony was lost on Ray, who focused solely on his escape.
I will build you a house with my own two hands.
The abandoned Mustang sat silently in the Atlanta housing project, a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. On April 10th, a resident, Mrs. John Riley, noticed the car and reported it to the FBI. Her son had spotted a Tourista sticker, a clue that would unlock Ray's movements in California. Meanwhile, in the FBI lab in Washington, technicians were carefully analyzing the evidence from Memphis. The fingerprint emerged from the rifle, a faint impression in the cold steel. The lab hummed with activity as technicians worked around the clock. At FBI headquarters, Cartha DeLoach contacted the fingerprint division. "How many prints do you have on file?" he asked. 3 million, came the reply. 3 million prints, and somewhere among them was the key to identify Martin Luther King Jr.'s killer. DeLoach narrowed the search. How many from escaped convicts? 53,000. 13 agents were assigned to the task, working day and night, comparing the single print from the rifle to those in the vast archive. The clock was ticking. Ray was out there building a new life, and every day that passed made it harder to find him. Then, on April 19th, the breakthrough came. Les Trotter, a veteran fingerprint examiner, stared at the print under his magnifying glass. Suddenly he saw it. The match. James Earl Ray. The phone rang in Cartha DeLoach's office. "James Earl Ray," the voice said. The manhunt had a name. The FBI now had a picture, a name, and a growing list of aliases. The chase was on. Ray was so close. With a valid passport and a ticket to Europe, he was on the verge of escaping justice. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Ray arrived in London and set in motion his plan. Ray was to fly to Brussels, where he planned to join a mercenary group and head to Rhodesia. At Heathrow Airport, the ticket clerk's attention to detail, a seemingly minor observation about the two passports, would set in motion the chain of events that led to Ray's downfall. As the Scotland Yard officer questioned Ray, the walls were closing in. His web of lies was unraveling, and his true identity was about to be exposed. The unregistered handgun, a symbol of Ray's violent past, would ultimately prove to be his undoing. The fingerprints sent from the FBI lab in Washington confirmed what the authorities had suspected. Ramon George Sneed was, in fact, James Earl Ray, the most wanted man in America. Within days, Ray was on a plane back to the United States, facing the consequences of his actions. Arthur Haynes, a court-appointed attorney from Alabama, initially represented Ray. But dissatisfaction with Haynes led to the hiring of Percy Foreman, a renowned defense lawyer. Foreman, a shrewd strategist, advised Ray to accept a plea deal, avoiding a trial and the possibility of the death penalty. 99 years. A life sentence for the man who took the life of a civil rights icon. James Earl Ray, the man who silenced a voice of hope and change, would spend the rest of his days behind bars, a reminder of the devastating consequences of hate and violence. Ray, ever the schemer, meticulously planned his escape. For months, he and a group of inmates secretly gathered materials and constructed a makeshift ladder. The prison walls loomed high, topped with razor wire. But Ray, driven by a burning desire for freedom, saw only the possibility of escape. Under the cover of darkness, they scaled the prison walls, the ladder creaking under their weight. Freedom was within reach. But their escape was short-lived. The alarm sounded, and the prison guards sprang into action. The escape triggered a massive manhunt, with helicopters circling overhead and bloodhounds tracking their scent through the rugged terrain. Within days, Ray and his fellow escapees were back behind bars. His escape attempt, a desperate gamble, underscored his relentless nature. Even after decades behind bars, Ray refused to give up hope of freedom. But the escape and his swift recapture demonstrated that Ray remained a fugitive at heart, unable to escape his criminal past. Years later, Ray's health deteriorated. He died from complications of hepatitis C on April 23, 1998, at the age of 70. His death in a prison hospital bed brought an end to a life marked by crime, violence, and notoriety. He died a convicted assassin, his name forever linked to the tragic death of Martin Luther King Jr. James Earl Ray's life ended far from the freedom he craved, but his actions and their devastating consequences would forever be etched in the history of the nation. His death closed one chapter in a complex and tragic story, but the questions surrounding the assassination and the motivations behind it continue to linger. James Earl Ray, a man consumed by hate and driven by a life of crime, would forever be linked to one of the most devastating moments in American history. His strident segregationist views fueled a deep resentment towards Martin Luther King Jr., the leader of the integration movement. This resentment, combined with his criminal tendencies, created a dangerous cocktail. Martin Luther King Jr. was more than just the face of the civil rights movement. He was a beacon of hope, a voice for the voiceless, and a symbol of peaceful resistance in a turbulent era. His message of equality threatened the status quo, making him a target for those who clung to segregation and white supremacy. Death threats were a constant reminder of the dangers he faced. This documentary does not claim to have all the answers. Our goal is to present verifiable information, explore the prevailing theories, and allow you, the viewer, to draw your own conclusions. The assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. remains shrouded in mystery and controversy. Decades later, questions persist about who was ultimately responsible. The idea of a conspiracy to kill King is not surprising. His high profile and the political climate of the time made such theories inevitable. Rumors swirled about the involvement of powerful figures, from business leaders and politicians to organized crime and even government agencies. Ray's guilty plea, while bringing a sense of closure, also raised questions about his motives, his potential accomplices, and the source of his funding. Did he act alone, or was he a pawn in a larger game? The assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. was a national tragedy, a loss that continues to resonate today. As we revisit this pivotal moment in history, we are reminded of the importance of fighting for justice and equality, and of the enduring power of King's dream. Despite James Earl Ray's guilty plea, questions about his role in the assassination persisted. Coretta Scott King, Martin Luther King Jr.'s widow, firmly believed that Ray had not acted alone. Ray himself fueled these suspicions, claiming he was merely a pawn in a larger conspiracy, manipulated by a shadowy figure known only as Raoul. This mysterious figure, he alleged, orchestrated the assassination and provided the funding. Ray's claims of inadequate legal representation and manipulation by his attorneys further fueled suspicions of a cover-up. He insisted that Raoul had lured him into the plot, using him as a scapegoat. The House Committee on Assassinations uncovered intriguing financial details, raising questions about the source of Ray's funds during his time on the run. While some speculated about illicit activities, the mystery of the unaccounted-for money remained. Ray's brothers, John and Jerry, were also drawn into the web of conspiracy theories, with allegations of their involvement in a bank robbery and potential financial support for James Earl. Adding to the intrigue was the alleged overheard conversation by a Memphis merchant who claimed to have heard a businessman order King's death, promising a payment of $5,000. Despite investigation, the FBI failed to uncover any concrete evidence to support this claim. The assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. continues to be a source of debate and speculation. Was James Earl Ray a lone wolf driven by hate, or was he a pawn in a larger conspiracy? The truth, it seems, remains elusive. Despite numerous investigations and inquiries, many questions remain unanswered. The identity of Raoul, the source of Ray's funding, and the extent of any potential conspiracy continue to fuel speculation. The assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. left a void in the nation, a wound that may never fully heal. The search for truth and justice continues, as we grapple with the complexities of this tragic event and its enduring impact on history. Despite James Earl Ray's confession and conviction, doubts lingered. Was he truly a lone wolf, or was there a more sinister force at play? The 1979 congressional inquiry, while inconclusive, fueled suspicions of a white supremacist plot, though no specific group or individual was identified. In a sensational 1993 television interview, Lloyd Jowers, the owner of Jim's Grill, claimed he was paid to facilitate the assassination. His story, however, was riddled with holes and contradictions, including the alleged involvement of a Memphis police officer and a recanted corroboration. William Pepper, a King family friend and attorney, championed Ray's innocence, pursuing appeals and even staging a televised mock trial that resulted in a not guilty verdict. However, his later accusations against a supposed hitman proved unfounded, further muddying the waters. Rumors and speculations swirled around the assassination like a dark vortex, pulling in various theories and accusations. The truth, however, remained elusive, slipping through the grasp of investigators and researchers alike. Despite numerous investigations, inquiries, and accusations, no definitive proof of a conspiracy has ever emerged. The truth remains shrouded in doubt and speculation. Was Ray a lone gunman driven by hate, or was he a pawn in a larger game? Did the conspiracy reach into the highest levels of power, or was it the work of rogue individuals with a sinister agenda? The assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. continues to cast a long shadow over American history. The questions surrounding James Earl Ray's role, the possibility of a conspiracy, and the ultimate truth behind this tragic event may never be fully answered. As we grapple with the complexities of this case, we are reminded of the fragility of justice and the enduring power of conspiracy theories in the face of uncertainty. Even from prison, James Earl Ray continued to proclaim his innocence. In a 1996 interview, he boldly declared he had no involvement in the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., a claim that failed a polygraph test. In a dramatic turn of events, the King family won a civil lawsuit against Lloyd Jowers, the owner of Jim's Grill, with the jury concluding that Jowers and government agencies had conspired to kill King. The family, accepting a symbolic $100 in damages, publicly declared their belief in Ray's innocence. Prompted by lingering questions and Jowers' allegations, the Justice Department reopened the investigation. Their 2000 report, however, systematically dismantled Jowers' story, finding no evidence of a conspiracy involving organized crime or the Memphis police, and concluding that Jowers had fabricated his claims for financial gain. If Ray was indeed part of a larger plot, he would have been an improbable choice. As an escaped convict with no stable residence and a penchant for aliases, he would have been a liability, not an asset. Furthermore, his purchase of a traceable firearm under a false name and his interstate travel with a weapon seemed at odds with the actions of someone trying to avoid detection. Despite official investigations and the discrediting of various conspiracy theories, doubts about James Earl Ray's role and the possibility of a larger plot continue to linger. The assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. remains a wound in the American psyche, a reminder of the fragility of justice and the enduring power of unanswered questions. As we revisit this pivotal moment in history, we are left to ponder the complexities of truth, the weight of evidence, and the enduring legacy of a man whose dream of equality continues to inspire generations. James Earl Ray's actions after the assassination were a series of blunders that seemed almost designed to ensure his capture. He left a trail of evidence that led straight to him, raising questions about his competence and motives. He discarded the murder weapon and a pair of traceable binoculars near the crime scene, practically inviting the authorities to connect him to the assassination. His purchase of the rifle, a federal crime for an escaped convict, further solidified his link to the killing. The assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. remains a pivotal moment in American history, a stark reminder of the destructive power of hate and violence. The search for answers continues as we strive to understand the complexities of this tragic event and its enduring impact on society.